December 18th, 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Staff Sergeant Charles Kelly pressed his hands against the young soldier's abdomen, trying to stop the bleeding. It wasn't working. The kid, Private First Class Danny Morrison from Ohio, had taken shrapnel from a German 88mm artillery shell. Fragments had torn through his stomach and intestines. He was hemorrhaging internally. Morrison looked up at Kelly with terrified eyes. "Am I going to die, Doc?" Kelly hated that question, because he always knew the answer before he said it. "You're going to be fine," Kelly lied. "Just stay with me." But Morrison wasn't going to be fine. He needed blood plasma, a transfusion to replace the blood volume he was losing. Without it, he'd go into hypovolemic shock within minutes. His organs would shut down. He'd be dead in 20 minutes. Kelly reached for his medical bag. Empty. He'd used his last unit of plasma an hour ago on another soldier who'd also died. Kelly had nothing left. No plasma, no whole blood, no albumin. The advanced medical supplies that could save Morrison's life were gone. All he had were bandages, morphine, and sulfa powder. Basics, useless for this kind of wound. Morrison's breathing became shallow. His skin turned pale and clammy, classic signs of shock. "Doc," Morrison whispered, "I'm cold." Kelly pulled a wool blanket over him, but it wouldn't help. The cold wasn't from the December weather, it was from blood loss. Kelly held Morrison's hand and watched him die. There was nothing else he could do. Morrison was the 14th soldier Kelly had watched die that day. Not from unsurvivable wounds, not from enemy action, from lack of medical supplies. It was December 18th, 1944. 3 days into the Battle of the Bulge, Germany's last major offensive on the Western Front. Hitler had gambled everything on a surprise attack through the Ardennes Forest, hoping to split Allied forces, capture the port of Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. The attack had caught the Americans completely off guard. Over 200,000 German troops had smashed through lightly defended American positions. Entire divisions were surrounded. Supply lines were cut. Communications were chaos. And, in the confusion, medical units were overwhelmed. Kelly's aid station was supposed to serve one infantry regiment, about 3,000 men. But after 3 days of fighting, he was treating wounded from 6 different units. Over 200 casualties had been brought to his position, and his supplies had run out on day 2. The situation was desperate across the entire Bulge salient. Wounded soldiers lay in field hospitals, in makeshift aid stations, in foxholes and cellars and barns. Medics did what they could with what they had, but without plasma, without morphine, without antibiotics, men died from wounds that should have been survivable. Kelly was a 28-year-old former medical student from Chicago. He'd enlisted in 1942, trained as a combat medic, and landed at Omaha Beach on D-Day. He'd seen a lot of death. But this was different. This wasn't combat. This was watching men die because of logistics. Kelly stood up, covered Morrison's body with a tarp, and looked around the aid station. It was a partially collapsed barn on the edge of a small Belgian village. Wounded soldiers lay on the floor, on stretchers, propped against walls. Most had been there for over 24 hours. The ones who could be stabilized had been evacuated yesterday, but the ambulances hadn't come back. Roads were blocked by German forces. The evacuation routes were under fire. So the seriously wounded stayed and kept accumulating. Kelly counted them. 47 men still alive in the barn. At least 30 needed blood plasma immediately. Another dozen needed morphine for pain management. 3 had infections that required antibiotics. He had none of those things. "Doc!" someone shouted. "We got another one coming in!" 2 soldiers carried a stretcher through the barn door. The wounded man on it was unconscious, his leg shredded by a landmine. Amputation. That's what he needed. Immediate amputation, then plasma to stabilize him from the shock and blood loss. Kelly could do the amputation. He had a surgical saw and plenty of experience, but without plasma to replace blood volume, the soldier would die during or immediately after the procedure. Kelly made a decision he'd made too many times already. Triage. "Put him with the expectants," Kelly said quietly. Expectants was the medical term for soldiers too badly wounded to save with available resources. You made them comfortable and let them die. The soldiers carrying the stretcher looked at Kelly with expressions that mixed anger, grief, and exhaustion, but they didn't argue. They knew the situation. Kelly walked outside into the snow, trying to clear his head. That's when he saw it. About 400 meters away, on the other side of a frozen creek, there was a building complex. Kelly had noticed it before, but hadn't paid much attention. It was behind German lines, in enemy-held territory. But now, in the fading afternoon light, Kelly saw something he hadn't noticed. Red cross markings on the roof. It was a German field hospital. And it looked abandoned.
To understand why Kelly was in this impossible situation, you need to understand how catastrophically the Battle of the Bulge had disrupted American operations. On December 16, 1944, at 5:30 a.m., over 2,000 German artillery pieces opened fire along an 80-mile front in the Ardennes forest. It was the largest German offensive since 1940. And it was a complete surprise. American intelligence had dismissed the possibility of a German attack. The Ardennes was considered a, quote, quiet sector, lightly defended, used for resting units or training new replacements. But Hitler had chosen it for exactly that reason. Surprise was his only advantage. Within hours, German panzer divisions were smashing through American positions. Entire regiments were surrounded. Command posts were overrun. Supply depots were captured. The American medical system, designed for steady, predictable casualty flow, completely broke down. Here's how military medicine was supposed to work in World War II. Level 1, Battalion Aid Station. Combat medics provide immediate first aid and stabilization. Soldiers with serious wounds are evacuated to Level 2, Collecting Station. More advanced treatment, surgical teams for emergency procedures, still close to front lines. Stable patients are evacuated to Level 3, Field Hospital. Full surgical facilities, blood banks, recovery wards, several miles behind lines. Long-term patients are sent to Level 4, General Hospital. Rear area hospitals with specialized care, rehabilitation, and long-term treatment. This system worked well in normal combat conditions. Wounded soldiers moved steadily backwards through the system, receiving progressively more advanced care. But the Battle of the Bulge shattered that system. German forces advanced so quickly that they captured or bypassed medical facilities. Ambulance routes were cut off by enemy penetrations. Supply convoys couldn't reach forward aid stations. Medical units found themselves surrounded behind enemy lines or caught in active combat zones. Kelly's aid station should have been a Level 1 facility, basic stabilization only, but with evacuation routes cut, it had become a field hospital by default. He was trying to do level 3 care with level 1 resources. It was impossible. The supply problem was particularly acute for blood plasma. Plasma, the liquid component of blood without the red cells, was a revolutionary medical breakthrough in World War II. It could be stored for months, didn't require refrigeration, and worked with any blood type. A soldier bleeding out from trauma could be stabilized with a plasma transfusion, buying time for surgery and more advanced treatment. The American Red Cross had collected millions of units of plasma. The military medical system distributed it throughout the supply chain. But plasma was bulky and heavy. A medic could only carry a few units in his field pack. Aid stations stockpiled dozens of units. Field hospitals kept hundreds. This system worked well as long as supply lines stayed open. But when German forces cut those supply lines on December 16th, plasma couldn't reach forward units. Kelly's aid station had started with 60 units of plasma. Within 48 hours, it was gone. He'd requested resupply, but the supply convoys weren't getting through. German forces controlled the roads. American trucks trying to reach surrounded units were being ambushed or turned back. Radio messages became increasingly desperate. Need plasma urgently. Casualties mounting. Request immediate medical resupply. Critical shortage. Running out of plasma. Men dying. Need help. The responses were always the same. Cannot send resupply. Routes blocked. Hold position. So Kelly held position and watched soldiers die. By December 18th, the situation across the entire Bulge salient was critical. Over 19,000 American soldiers had been killed, wounded, or captured in just 3 days. Medical facilities were overwhelmed. Supplies were running out everywhere. Some aid stations had plasma but no morphine. Others had morphine but no surgical equipment. Some had nothing at all. Medics improvised desperately. They reused bandages. They diluted morphine to make it last longer. They performed surgery without anesthesia. And they made triage decisions no one should ever have to make. And they watched men die from survivable wounds. Kelly had been trained at Fort Sam Houston in Texas, one of the best medical training facilities in the U.S. military. He knew modern battlefield medicine. He knew what was possible with proper resources. That made it worse, because he knew exactly what he needed to save these men, and he knew he didn't have it. The frustration was unbearable. If you're finding this story from the vault as powerful as we did researching it, take a second to hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It helps us uncover more untold stories like this from World War II. Now, back to Charles Kelly's impossible decision. Kelly stared at the German field hospital across the frozen creek. The building was a converted barn and farmhouse complex, similar to his own aid station. Red Cross markings clearly visible on the roof, Geneva Convention protected status. But it looked deserted. No smoke from chimneys, no vehicles, no movement. The Wehrmacht had retreated from this sector yesterday, falling back to consolidate defensive positions. In their haste, they'd apparently abandoned the medical facility. Kelly's mind raced. German field hospitals would be stocked with medical supplies, plasma, morphine, sulfa drugs, surgical equipment, everything Kelly desperately needed. But there were problems. First, it was in enemy territory, maybe 400 meters away, but across an open field that could be under German observation or sniper fire. Second, Entering a German facility was technically looting. Military regulations were strict about this. Medical supplies were supposed to be captured by combat units and turned over to Quartermaster Corps for proper inventory and distribution. A medic independently liberating enemy supplies wasn't authorized, even if his intentions were good. Third, the building might not be abandoned. Could be a trap. Germans sometimes left behind booby-trapped facilities. But Kelly looked back at the barn where 47 wounded Americans were waiting to die. And he made his decision. Kelly found his commanding officer, Lieutenant Robert Hayes, in a foxhole behind the barn. "Sir, I need permission to check out that German hospital." "The one across the creek?" "Yes, sir. Looks abandoned. Might have medical supplies." Hayes was quiet for a moment. He was a 22-year-old infantry officer who'd been promoted after his company commander was killed on D-Day. He was exhausted, stressed, and dealing with his own problems. His company was down to 60 men from the original 180. "Kelly, that's enemy territory. We don't control that ground." "I know, sir, but we need supplies. Men are dying." "If it's abandoned, combat units will secure it eventually. Then Quartermaster will inventory any supplies. That could take days, sir. I need it now." Hayes rubbed his face. "Kelly, if you go over there and get killed, I don't have another medic. If I don't go, more men die." Hayes stared at him for a long moment. "If I give you permission and you get caught looting German supplies, you'll be court-martialed, and so will I for authorizing it." "Then don't authorize it, sir. I'll go on my own." Hayes shook his head. "You're putting me in an impossible position." "You're in an impossible position anyway, sir. We're surrounded, cut off, running out of everything. What's one more impossible thing?" Hayes thought about it. "I can't officially authorize this, but if you happen to go check if that facility is actually abandoned, and if you happen to find supplies that could save American lives, and if you happen to bring those supplies back here—" "I didn't see anything." "Clear?" "Clear, sir." "Take someone with you. Don't go alone." "Yes, sir." Kelly found Corporal Mike Torres, a rifleman who'd been helping with the wounded. "Torres, I need you to cover me on a supply run." "Where?" Kelly pointed at the German hospital. Torres looked at him like he was insane. "Doc, that's across an open field. If there's a German sniper anywhere, you're dead." "I know, but I need plasma, and that's where it is." Torres checked his M1 Garand rifle. "When?" "Now, before it gets dark." They left at 4:30 p.m., just as the winter sun was setting. Kelly carried his medical bag in a large canvas sack for supplies. Torres carried his rifle and extra ammunition. They moved carefully down the hillside toward the creek, using scattered trees for cover. Every few meters, they'd stop and scan for movement. Nothing. The field was silent except for distant artillery. They crossed the frozen creek, boots crunching on ice. Kelly expected gunfire at any moment. Still nothing. They reached the German facility and pressed against the wall. Torres covered the approach while Kelly peered through a window. The interior was a mess, overturned furniture, scattered papers, abandoned equipment. But no people, no bodies. The Wehrmacht had evacuated completely. Kelly tried the door, unlocked. They entered carefully, weapons ready. The first room was a surgical theater, operating table still set up, instruments scattered on trays, blood-stained sheets in a pile. The second room was storage, and Kelly felt his heart race. Shelves lined with medical supplies, boxes of German plasma packages marked Blut plasma, morphine ampules, sulfa powder, bandages, surgical equipment. It was everything Kelly needed. Enough supplies to treat hundreds of casualties. Torres, Kelly said quietly, jackpot.
Kelly and Torres worked fast, loading supplies into bags and boxes. Kelly grabbed plasma first, at least 40 units, maybe more. Each unit was packaged differently than American plasma, labeled in German, but Kelly recognized the containers. Then morphine, dozens of ampules. Sulfa powder for infections, bandages, surgical clamps. Torres found a box of German field dressings, individually wrapped, better quality than American ones. "Doc, how much can we carry?" "As much as possible. Make multiple trips if we have to." Kelly's mind was racing. This wasn't just enough for immediate needs. This could last days, maybe a week. He could save so many lives with this. But a thought nagged at him. This was technically looting. These were captured enemy supplies. He was supposed to report them to higher command, let quartermaster handle distribution. Taking them without authorization was a violation of military regulations. Article 103 of the Articles of War. Any person subject to military law who wrongfully appropriates military property shall be punished as a court-martial may direct. Even enemy supplies fell under that regulation once captured territory was secured. But Kelly pushed the thought aside. He'd deal with consequences later. Right now, men were dying. They loaded everything they could carry and started back across the field. The return trip felt longer, more exposed. They were carrying heavy loads, moving slowly. Halfway across the field, Torres suddenly dropped flat. "Get down." Kelly hit the ground. "What?" "Movement, northern tree line." Kelly looked. A dark shape moving through the woods. Could be German patrol, could be American, could be nothing. They waited, motionless, for 2 minutes. Nothing happened. "Let's move," Torres said. They made it back to the barn without incident. When Kelly entered the aid station carrying boxes of supplies, the other medics stared. "Where the hell did you get all that?" Sergeant Louis Brennan asked. "German hospital across the creek, abandoned." "Jesus, Doc, that's looting." "I don't care what it is, we need it." Kelly immediately went to work. The soldier who'd been put with the expectants an hour ago was still alive, barely. Kelly set up a plasma line, hung the German plasma bag, started the transfusion. Within 15 minutes, the soldier's color improved. Pulse steadied. He was stabilizing. Kelly moved to the next patient, and the next. By nightfall, Kelly had administered plasma to 23 soldiers. 7 would have certainly died without it. Another 16 were stabilized enough for eventual evacuation. The other medics were amazed. "That German plasma works just as well as ours," Brennan said. "Blood is blood," Kelly replied. "Doesn't matter what language is on the label." Over the next 3 days, Kelly made 4 more trips to the German hospital. Each time, he and Torres brought back more supplies, morphine, bandages, surgical equipment, even German medical textbooks that Kelly studied to understand their supplies better. By December 21st, Kelly had treated over 200 wounded soldiers with the captured supplies. The survival rate at his aid station became the highest in the division. Word spread. Other units asked how Kelly's aid station was so well supplied when everyone else was running out. Kelly told them the truth. "I'm using German supplies." Most medics were envious. A few were concerned about the legality. Lieutenant Hayes kept his promise. He never officially acknowledged what Kelly was doing, but he didn't stop it either. And wounded soldiers kept surviving.
On December 23rd, the situation changed. American forces launched a counterattack, pushing German forces back. Supply lines reopened, evacuation routes were secured, and American quartermaster units moved into the area to inventory captured German equipment. That's when they discovered the German field hospital Kelly had been liberating. A quartermaster captain arrived at Kelly's aid station with a clipboard and a very serious expression. "Sergeant Kelly?" "Yes, sir." "Captain Morrison, Quartermaster Corps. I need to ask you some questions about German medical supplies." Kelly's heart sunk. This was it. "I've been using captured German supplies to treat wounded, sir. Emergency situation. We had no American supplies." "I understand that, but there's a procedure for handling captured enemy materiel. You're supposed to report it, not take it." "Sir, with respect, men were dying. I didn't have time for procedure." "How much did you take?" Kelly thought about lying. But what was the point? "Probably 60, 80 units of plasma, couple hundred ampules of morphine, bandages, sulfa powder, surgical equipment, multiple trips over 4 days." Captain Morrison wrote it all down. "That's a significant quantity, worth several $1,000s. I used it all treating wounded Americans, sir. I didn't sell it. I didn't waste it." "That's not the point, Sergeant. The point is you violated regulations regarding captured enemy property." "So, what happens now?" Morrison closed his notebook. "I have to report this to the Provost Marshal. There will likely be an investigation, possibly charges." "Charges?" "Looting captured enemy property, Article 103 violation. Could result in court-martial." Kelly felt numb. "Sir, I saved over 200 men with those supplies." "I believe you did, Sergeant. But that doesn't change the fact that you violated regulations." "I'm sorry. I'm just doing my job." Morrison left. Kelly stood there, trying to process what had just happened. He'd done everything right, saved lives, used resources that would have otherwise gone to waste. And now he might face court-martial. The investigation moved fast. On December 26th, the situation changed. American forces launched a counterattack, pushing German forces back. Supply lines reopened, evacuation routes were secured, and American quartermaster units moved into the area to inventory captured German equipment. That's when they discovered the German field hospital Kelly had been liberating. A quartermaster captain arrived at Kelly's aid station with a clipboard and a very serious expression. "Sergeant Kelly." "Yes, sir." "Captain Morrison, Quartermaster Corps. I need to ask you some questions about German medical supplies." Kelly's heart sunk. This was it. "I've been using captured German supplies to treat wounded, sir. Emergency situation. We had no American supplies." "I understand that, but there's a procedure for handling captured enemy materiel. You're supposed to report it, not take it." "Sir, with respect, men were dying. I didn't have time for procedure." "How much did you take?" Kelly thought about lying, but what was the point? "Probably 60, 80 units of plasma, couple hundred ampules of morphine, bandages, sulfa powder, surgical equipment, multiple trips over 4 days." Captain Morrison wrote it all down. That's a significant quantity, worth several $1,000s. I used it all treating wounded Americans, sir. I didn't sell it. I didn't waste it. That's not the point, Sergeant. The point is you violated regulations regarding captured enemy property. So, what happens now? Morrison closed his notebook. I have to report this to the Provost Marshal. There will likely be an investigation, possibly charges. Charges? Looting captured enemy property, Article 103 violation, could result in court-martial. Kelly felt his world collapsing. He'd survived D-Day, fought across France, endured the Battle of the Bulge, and now he was going to be court-martialed for saving lives. It was absurd, Kafkaesque. But it was happening. News of Kelly's situation spread through the medical units. Medics were outraged. They knew what Kelly had done. They knew he'd saved lives under impossible circumstances. Wounded soldiers who had been treated with the German supplies started writing letters to their families, telling the story of the medic who had broken rules to save them. One of those letters reached a reporter for Stars and Stripes, the military newspaper. On December 28, 1944, Stars and Stripes ran a story. Medic faces court-martial for saving lives with German supplies. The article detailed Kelly's actions, the lives he'd saved, and the absurdity of charging him with looting. It was picked up by newspapers back in the United States. Suddenly, Charles Kelly's story was national news. And the pressure on the military to drop charges became intense. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, read the Stars and Stripes article in his headquarters at Versailles. He was dealing with the aftermath of the Battle of the Bulge, 19,000 American casualties, the worst U.S. defeat of the war in Europe. And now he was reading about a medic being court-martialed for using enemy supplies to save wounded American soldiers. Eisenhower called a meeting with his staff. "Explain to me," Eisenhower said, "why we're prosecuting a medic for saving lives." A legal officer explained, "Sir, regulations are clear. Captured enemy property must be inventoried and distributed through proper channels. Taking it without authorization is looting, regardless of intent." So, if this medic had let men die while waiting for proper channels, he'd be following regulations? Technically, yes, sir. Eisenhower was furious. "That's insane! We're in the middle of the worst battle we've fought. Supply lines were cut. Men were dying. This medic improvised with available resources. That's exactly what we train soldiers to do. Sir, if we don't enforce regulations, it sets a precedent. The precedent I want to set is that saving American lives is more important than paperwork." Eisenhower made a decision. He personally intervened in the case. On January 3, 1945, Eisenhower issued an order. All charges against Staff Sergeant Charles Kelly were dropped. Furthermore, Kelly was awarded the Silver Star for gallantry in action. The citation read, "For exemplary courage and resourcefulness in securing medical supplies under combat conditions, thereby saving the lives of numerous American soldiers." Eisenhower added a personal note to the order. "Regulations exist to support the mission, not obstruct it. Sergeant Kelly understood the mission: save American lives. He succeeded." Kelly was stunned when he received the news. He'd gone from facing court-martial to receiving one of the highest military decorations. Lieutenant Hayes shook his hand. "Congratulations, Doc. You deserved it." "I just did what had to be done, sir." "I know. That's why you deserved it." The other medics celebrated. Wounded soldiers who'd been saved by Kelly's actions cheered when they heard. But Kelly felt conflicted because he knew the truth. He hadn't done anything heroic. He just refused to let men die when he had the means to save them. The real heroes were the soldiers who'd fought and died in the Bulge. He was just a medic who'd bent some rules. But the military needed a positive story. After the shock and losses of the Battle of the Bulge, they needed a hero. So Charles Kelly became one.
Charles Kelly survived the war. He returned to the United States in 1945, was honorably discharged, and went back to Chicago. He finished medical school, became a surgeon, and worked at Cook County Hospital for 35 years. He rarely talked about his military service. When asked about the Silver Star, he'd say, "I was just doing my job." In 1984, a researcher working on a book about Battle of the Bulge medical operations tracked Kelly down for an interview. Kelly was 68 years old, retired, living quietly. The researcher asked, "Do you think you did the right thing, taking those German supplies?" Kelly thought for a moment. "I saved 200 lives. How could that be wrong?" "But you violated regulations." "Regulations are written by people who aren't watching soldiers bleed to death. When you're there, in that moment, the regulations don't matter. What matters is whether you can live with yourself afterwards." "And can you?" "I sleep fine," Kelly said. Kelly's story raises profound questions about rules, ethics, and military justice. Was he right to take the German supplies? Legally, no. He violated clear regulations. But morally? He saved 200 lives. The military eventually changed its policies, partly based on Kelly's case. New regulations clarified that medical personnel could use captured enemy medical supplies in emergency situations without waiting for authorization. It was nicknamed the Kelly exception. The broader lesson is about the tension between rules and results. Military organizations need rules. They need discipline, order, predictable procedures. But war is chaos, and sometimes following the rules means people die unnecessarily. Kelly understood that. He chose results over rules, lives over regulations, and he was willing to face the consequences. That's what made him a hero. Not that he broke rules, but that he was willing to accept responsibility for breaking them. Charles Kelly died in 1992 at age 76. His obituary in the Chicago Tribune mentioned his Silver Star, but didn't explain the story behind it. The German field hospital he looted was destroyed in later fighting. Nothing remains of it today. But the 200 men Kelly saved with those supplies, they went home. They had lives, families, careers. Some became teachers, some became businessmen, some became fathers and grandfathers. All because a medic decided that saving lives mattered more than following regulations. There's a tendency to romanticize World War II as a clear moral conflict, good versus evil, heroes versus villains. But real heroism is often more complicated than that. Kelly wasn't a warrior charging into battle. He was a medic who broke rules, faced punishment, and did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. That's harder than being brave in combat, because combat heroism is recognized, celebrated, rewarded. But doing the right thing when the rules say it's wrong, that requires a different kind of courage. Kelly had that courage, and 200 American soldiers lived because of it. If you found this story as powerful as we did, make sure you're subscribed to WW2 Vault. We're unlocking more untold stories like this every day. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story from the Vault.